Many years ago, I was sitting in a graduate class at Johns Hopkins University, and I was listening to a summary of the Gospels of Mark, John, and Paul. Professor, one of the top professors in Johns Hopkins University, and one of the most brilliant professors that I've ever come across, was going through the various contradictions throughout all the different Gospels, and I just sat there, an innocent Jew, viewed myself as a bystander, just listening to the contradictions one after the next, and I just raised my hand. I had a nice relationship with this professor, and I said, "Excuse me, professor, but tell me, how can a person espouse the Christian faith without reconciling all these contradictions that are germane to the very tenets, the foundations of the faith?" And he said to me, "You know what, Rabbi Feiner," I was in rabbinical school at the time as well, and he says to me, "Rabbi Feiner, I have to be honest with you. You're right, but you know what? The majority of the world, they don't even read the Gospels. They haven't looked at the New Testament. This was a brilliant class, 35, 40 students." He said, "Show of hands, how many people have ever read the New Testament?" One person raised his hand. But he says, "You know what? In the Old Testament, in your Torah, Rabbi, you also have a lot of contradictions." So I said, "Okay, sure, professor, hit me with one. Tell me what's bothering you about the Torah." So we were discussing in the preceding minutes the contradictions between the second coming and all the Gospels, the way that they report many of the fundamentals, the tenets of the faith. And out of every single thing that he could pick regarding the validity of the Torah and the truth and veracity of the Torah is, "But Rabbi, the Torah records that Abraham, your first patriarch, he had camels. And we know from archaeological evidence that the only camel bones that have been discovered are ones, domesticated camel bones, that existed 500 or so years after the time of Abraham." So without even getting into that, I just said, "Professor, I'm hitting you with the basic fundamentals of the Christian faith, and you're hitting me back with camels? The only thing that bothers you, this brilliant professor who parenthetically said to a friend of mine in the same master's program at Johns Hopkins, if he could live his life over again, he'd actually go ahead and be an observant Jew." Those are the words that came out of his mouth. He says there's nothing like the Torah. But the only thing that bothered him is, what are you going to do about camel bones? I can live with camel bones. We have questions that we have to deal with. We have somewhat apparent contradictions, and you know what? We have numerous commentaries. Manifold commentaries from medieval classical times that address every one of these contradictions. We have answers. How to understand that the Torah is true? Many different approaches. I recommend very highly Dr. Lawrence Kellerman's Permission to Receive, delineating 4 beautiful approaches to how we know that the Torah is actually true, is 100% true and divine in origin. And Aisha Torah's Kiruv Primer, The Eye of the Needle, it's discussed as well. I like to just focus on one of the many proofs. One general proof is regarded as the historical proof. And that is that if you look at all the religions of the world, you'll notice that even though there have been approximately 15,000 different religions recorded in the world's history, there's only one religion that makes claim to something called national revelation. Every other religion, so whether you say it's Jesus, Muhammad, it's one prophet who comes out of the woods after years or some period in solitude, having sequestered himself, comes to the world and proclaims, "You know what, I was visited by God, I'm a prophet, and I'm going to start a new religion." And he manages to build up the religion, a whole entourage of people, until it expands over time. Judaism is the only nation that makes claim to what seems to be an unbelievable declaration, and that is national revelation. We go back over 3,300 years, and we have constantly clung steadfast to the notion that God revealed himself not only to his prophet Moses, not only to the greatest prophet that ever lived, to Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of the Jewish people, but he revealed himself simultaneously to between 2.5 and 3 million members of the Jewish nation, and they all heard God speak to them as a people, collectively. God manifested, revealed himself in the world, not only to one individual, not to 2, not to a small group, to every living member of the Jewish people. And it's been passed on from generation to generation. Now, can you ever imagine a hoax like that being perpetuated? It never has, because there's no other claim like it. And every religion knows that. Wouldn't it be the most awesome claim to say that instead of God revealed himself to Jesus or to Muhammad, God revealed himself to every single Christian alive at the time? Why can no other religion make claim to such a statement? Because it's ridiculous. If it didn't actually happen, for someone to fabricate that and for it to be perpetuated from time immemorial, it would have to have been true. There's only one religion out of all the 15,000 plus religions in the world that make such a claim, and you know why? Because it's 100% true. Because God revealed himself to every single member of the Jewish people. Everybody alive at the time experienced the grand revelation at Sinai. Everybody passed it on to his child, to their children, to their children's children. It's been passed on from generation to generation, from time immemorial, from 3,300 years ago. And every Jew living today, every observant Jew espouses this 100%. And it's a major fundamental of their faith. We're the only ones to champion such a claim. Who wrote the Torah? For someone to write in numerous places throughout Scriptures that God revealed himself to all the Jewish people. And for God to actually give us a command that we have to remember it throughout all of our Jewish history. And it's incumbent upon us to give it over to our children and their children's children. That God gave us the Torah that God gave the Torah collectively to all the Jewish people. Historical approach. Need we say more than that? Sure, there are other approaches focusing on many of the ideas bandied about the Scriptures, how it has to be divine in origin, but just one basic approach, which seems to head the list. We're the only nation in the world. God spoke to us all together, and he said, I'm giving you the Torah now. Everything in the Torah that the Torah claims, it's either all happened, or it's in the process of happening. When we behaved, we got rewarded. When we misbehaved, we got appropriately punished. Every contradiction that appears is answered by numerous commentators. The veracity of the Torah is unquestionable. The veracity and the perpetuity of the Jewish people is unquestionable. The Torah is 100% true. Let's not make that mistake of that brilliant professor who says, you know what, Rabbi, if I could do it all over again, I'd be an observant Jew. Because I know, from reading the Old Testament and the New Testament, I know that the Old Testament is in fact divine in origin. And I know that every word of that Torah is true. If that's a brilliant professor from Johns Hopkins, and we have the merit to be born Jewish, to grow up Jewish, let's take the Torah, the guidebook, to what it means to be Jewish and to live a Jewish life. Let's follow the words of the Torah as best as we can. Let's recognize that every word is true. Every letter is true. We have an extremely close relationship with the God who gave us the Torah. It's divine in origin. Let's espouse it. Let's learn it. Let's study it. Let's observe its laws as best as we can so that we can maximize our potential and fulfill the mission of the Jewish people by spreading the light onto the nations of the world through that special book, the veracity of that Torah, which remains and forever will remain 100% unquestionable.